Hello everyone, welcome to Shdows Secrit. Tonight we delve deep into one of the most chilling legends ever whispered in the shadows of forgotten history, the tale of the cemetery of whispering bones graves that speak at midnight, a cursed place where silence is only an illusion and death does not bring rest but a terrible voice that echoes from beneath the ground. And as you listen to this narration, imagine yourself walking through a path covered in heavy fog, the trees looming like twisted guardians of secrets, the moonlight barely piercing through, and somewhere ahead stands the old cemetery, its rusted gates leaning sideways, chains broken as if someone or something forced them open long ago. The legend says this ground was never meant to hold the dead, but was chosen out of desperation centuries ago when a plague swept across the land, taking thousands of lives within weeks. Entire families, entire villages, their bodies piled into mass graves because there was no time for proper burials, no prayers, no blessings, no final words, and the souls of the departed, angry and restless, were chained to the soil, their whispers trapped, and over generations, the story grew. Darker people claimed that at the stroke of midnight, when the world is at its thinnest veil, those voices rise, mingling together like a chorus of pain, torment, and unfulfilled rage. Locals warn that if you listen too closely, the whispers will change. They will begin to call your name, begging you to join them. Some say the whispers are not mere sounds but hands, invisible hands clawing at your mind, dragging your spirit toward the earth, trying to bury you alive in a grave that has no marker, no escape, no end, and for centuries no priest, no exorcist, no holy man has been able to silence them. They say when blessings were read, the voices screamed louder, drowning out scripture with curses in forgotten tongues. They say the crosses hammered into the earth bent overnight like brittle twigs, and those who stood in defiance of the whispers returned home hollow-eyed, haunted. And some never spoke again. Now imagine the scene as travelers dared to test the legend, drawn by curiosity. They brought lanterns and cameras. They wanted proof. They wanted to show the world this was just an empty graveyard. But the footage that has surfaced tells another story. Shaky hand holding cameras recorded faint voices growing louder, first like wind, then like hundreds of people muttering at once, then clearly forming words, names, confessions, pleas for help, curses of revenge. And when those explorers fled, their recordings carried the whispers back with them, cursed objects of sound, spreading the cemetery's reach beyond its iron gates. And witnesses who watched the footage later reported hearing whispers in their homes, whispers at night when no one else was awake, whispers calling them to return to the source, to the cemetery itself. Now there is the infamous story of the young historian named Daniel who believed it was all folklore. He was fascinated by forgotten burial sites and old rituals. He dismissed the warnings as superstition, so one autumn night he went there alone, with a notebook and a recorder. Determined to document everything, he sat by one of the crumbling headstones as midnight approached. The silence was suffocating, then suddenly the air shifted, the temperature dropped, his breath became visible, and the ground beneath him trembled with faint vibrations. His recorder captured it all. The whispers began as murmurs, like water boiling beneath the soil, then they sharpened distinct words, voices overlapping, some begging forgiveness, others screaming, and then one chilling detail the recorder picked up his own name. Daniel whispered again and again, "Daniel, Daniel, come closer, Daniel, we see you, Daniel, lie with us, Daniel, don't be afraid." Daniel's diary was found weeks later in his apartment, filled with frantic scribbles, lines repeated endlessly. "They know my name. They won't stop calling me." His friends say he stopped sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he claimed he could hear them just beneath his pillow, until one night he vanished. His apartment door still locked from inside, his bed empty but sheets damp with soil, and no one ever saw him again. Stories like Daniel's are not unique. For centuries there are tales of shepherds who heard voices in the fog, of children who wandered too close and came back speaking in strange tongues, of entire groups of travelers who disappeared without a trace, the cemetery swallowing them whole, and always the whispers remain, growing stronger, waiting, feeding on those who dare to listen. Some scientists tried to rationalize it, suggesting underground currents, shifting stones, natural acoustics creating auditory illusions, but none of them could explain how the voices called out names or why their equipment malfunctioned at midnight. Batteries drained instantly, compasses spun wildly, and shadows moved without light to cast them. Priests attempted once again in the early 1900s to cleanse the cemetery. They formed a circle, candles in hand, chanting prayers, but the wind rose suddenly, extinguishing every flame, and the ground shook so violently that cracks split open between the graves. A black mist poured out, and one priest was thrown against the gate so hard his spine snapped. The rest fled in terror, never returning. Since then no holy man dared to step foot there again. The cemetery was left to rot, consumed by moss and silence by day, but by night alive with the dead, and yet curiosity never dies. People continue to come, thrill. Seekers, ghost hunters, skeptics, and many never leave, and those who return are never truly whole again. Their minds haunted, their souls fractured. Some end up in asylums, scratching the walls, whispering to themselves, repeating phrases no one else can understand, and at least one case recorded a man who kept digging holes in his yard every night, saying the voices needed room, until one morning he was found buried in his own pit, soil packed tightly in his lungs, as though he had willingly breathed the grave. The most chilling account is of the whispers evolving, learning, adapting, not just speaking but answering. A survivor once said he asked out loud who they were, and the voices responded all at once, "We are everyone, we are you." Before the man collapsed, and when he awoke, half his hair had turned white overnight. Locals believe that each year the voices grow louder because the cemetery is no longer satisfied with being confined. It reaches beyond, through dreams, through sound, through fear, seeking new souls to claim. And it is said if you hear whispers in the dead of night when you are far from anyone, you must never answer, because if you do, they will know your name, and once they know your name, they will never stop until you join them. And so the cemetery remains, forgotten yet alive, waiting beneath a canopy of twisted branches and broken stones, a place where midnight is not the end of the day but the beginning of the horror, a place where the silence is broken by the chorus of the damned, a place where even the bravest hearts are reduced to trembling shadows. And as you hear this story, remember, if you ever find yourself wandering near such a graveyard, never linger when the clock strikes 12, never lean close to the ground, and above all, never listen too carefully, for the whispers are not just echoes of the dead, they are invitations, binding contracts of the soul, and the cemetery of whispering bones is always hungry for one more voice to join its eternal choir, waiting, calling, whispering, perhaps even now as you listen in the darkness. Their whispers are finding their way to you, faint at first but growing clearer, your name forming on unseen lips, carried by wind, seeping into your thoughts, reminding you that once you know the legend, you are never truly safe again, because the dead have patience, the dead have eternity, and they will whisper until you finally answer. Thank you for watching Shdows Secrit. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying stories from the shadows.